Sports Talk Daily with Andrew Hustler Paterson and Michael Remis.
Hey everybody, what is up? Welcome to Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily. Great show today planned and a great night of hockey beginning at 6 p.m. down at Canada Life Center. Jets and Wild, 100% capacity. Finally, fans back in the building. Hopefully a great crowd for what should be a very interesting hockey game. Our Winnipeg Jets looking to get back in the win column and after a very disappointing loss to the Chicago Blackhawks to begin a busy week at home, and the Minnesota Wild coming in, remembering what happened between these two teams last week. Tim Campbell from NHL.com will join us coming up in about 45 minutes or so. Looking forward to talking with Tim about the Winnipeg Jets, as well as a number of other stories, specifically with the Canadian Western team. Another big win for the Calgary Flames last night. Oilers go back-to-back in San Jose and LA last night. And, of course, the very long uphill battle of the Winnipeg Jets that was compounded by that loss on home ice to the Chicago Blackhawks earlier this week. So we will have a ton of Jets content as well. We are also going to be talking Olympics because tonight, after we finish up at Canada Life Center, whether you're pulling into one of your favorite watering holes after the game or getting your butt home and sitting on the couch, the puck will drop just after 10 p.m. One of the greatest rivalries in all of sports, Canada and the USA for gold in Olympic women's hockey. And Sean Fitz-Gerald from The Athletic has a great piece on the history of this rivalry dating back to the 90s. And Sean's going to join us a little later on today to talk about that as well as tonight's game and what's at stake. And we'll also catch up with our old pal Mitch Peacock, who had just finished up another stint of calling Olympic action. Mitch, of course, was the voice of short track speed skating, and a historic performance today by the Canadian men in the 5,000. And Charles Hamelin ties Cindy Klassen as the most decorated Winter Olympian of all time, and Andre de Grasse is the most decorated male Olympian of all time. So we'll cook up with Mitch. I'm interested in actually talking to Mitch as well about just how difficult it is calling Olympic events remotely. And of course, we've got the disappointment of Canada losing to Sweden in hockey in a real tough game for Jen Jones. Still not out, but down after a kind of shocking loss to China earlier today. So we're going to get to all of that today on the program. And coming up first off, as far as guests go, the newest Winnipeg Blue Bomber, Greg Ellingson, joining the program. So really looking forward to having that. So it's going to be packed. Great to have you with us. Shout out to everybody watching on YouTube. Just before we do get into the program and bring Michael Remis in, a big thank you to all the sponsors that make this show happen each and every day. F Apparel, Vita Health Fresh Market, Culligan Water, Manitoba Battery, Royal Sports, Not Auto Corp, Little Brown Jug, Princess Auto, Boston Pizza, the Nick and Nicky DQ Group, Canadian Club Whiskey, and of course our friends over at Coolbet Canada. Let's get Remis in here to get things going. Remo, what's up? How you doing?
I'm here. I'm fired up. If you're watching the video, I'm repping Slovakia today. Big win yesterday in overtime. Their kids are celebrating their Miroslav Shatan, posting out a video. So very happy for Slovakia getting to the semifinals first time since 2010. What a shootout it was last night versus the USA. I think we can all agree, Huss. Like, who is the one in charge being like, you know what, in the playoffs, in the Olympics, we'll do 10 minutes of 3-on-3 overtime, and look, can't score, you're going to go to a shootout. Like, who thinks going to a shootout in playoff Olympic hockey is a good idea? Why
to
are
be
we
honest,
still doing
3-on-3, like even 3-on-3. Like, I enjoy 3-on-3, but 3-on-3 is as gimmicky and as much of a joke as a shootout is. I'm sorry. I mean, entertaining, yes. Is it real hockey? I mean, I guess somewhat, yeah. But you know what? One-on-one challenges between a shooter and a goaltender happens in hockey too. I mean, it's called a penalty shot. Bottom line is, it's a great way of breaking a tie in a regular season game when you've got 82 games and, you can't have, 5 and 6 period games with games the next night. But when it's the grand finale, when it's for all the marbles, when it is in the playoffs, it's just not enough. I would prefer, I could handle 4-on-4 maybe for 10, and then 3-on-3 for 10, and then a shootout. But I would prefer no shootouts. And you know me, Reem, I love shootouts. In fact, anyone that had the opportunity to watch the Bruins Ranger game last night, one of the best shootouts I can remember, a full 9 rounds. Igor Shesterkin, by the way, is the truth. Keandre Miller with the winner. And it was absolutely electric in Madison Square Garden. But we don't want to see that in the playoffs. I mean, I'd rather see that than walking out after a tie. But listen, if if there's a will, there's a way. And I really do think that with the results in some of these way the tie-breaking method happens right now in international hockey, there has to be room, at least in the playoff round, and especially in the gold medal game, for a little bit more. Yeah. We've seen a number of tweaks and changes over the years. It certainly is possible, but yeah, it's a hell of a terrible way to have your Olympic dream ended on a penalty shot.
I want to know like who's coming up with the idea and like no, everyone's like, oh shoot, who's thinking this is a good idea? I'll never understand, but I will say, if you can't score a goal in 10 minutes of 3-on-3, you should be punished and have to play in a shootout. Should definitely be punishment. But we did have, I think I saw a lot of people tweeting U.S. Olympic hockey last night going into overtime. Shout out to Slovakia for tying it up in the final minute. But Canada men's hockey team losing this morning to Sweden. They are eliminated. So I'm curious how this men's Olympic gold will shake out. We did have the riveting final last time with Germany and ROC. So
yeah, so who's left? The Swedes are left, the Slovaks are left, Finland, and the Russians. Mm-hmm. So Denmark, Switzerland out. They weren't expected to win, but the United States and Canada, very disappointing performances, not even getting to the Final Four. And you know what? In some ways, I mean, I don't know about you, Remo. I watched some of that game last night. I did get up early to watch. I was frankly a lot more invested in the curling than I was in the hockey. And I don't know. I mean, much like so many other things that have been ruined by the damn pandemic, it was just a disappointing, anticlimactic end to an event that we had been salivating about for years. And it ends up with a whimper before really, I think, getting going. And I don't even know how many Canadians, to be honest, really paid much attention to the Olympic men's hockey tournament. But that's fine, because the main event is tonight. Canada, USA for gold in women's hockey. Sean Fitz-Gerald's going to join us a little later on, Remis, but it doesn't get much better than this. This Canadian team has been looking incredible heading into this gold medal match, and they've got a gold medal to get returned from the United States after they lost it in Korea in 2018.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. This is the real main event of the Olympic hockey. Canada, U.S. women, as you and Sean will talk about later, the biggest rivalry or best rivalry in North American sports. I think there's definitely an argument to be made. And thankfully, thank the scheduling for putting the Jets game at 6 and then 10 o'clock, or 10:10, whatever, is the Olympic final gold medal game, Canada-US. So it's going to be good. It's going to be fireworks. You said yesterday you just bet on overtime and Marie-Philippe Poulin to score the winner. I mean, I have no idea, but it has worked out that way the last couple times, and always, on the edge of your seat. Very intense hockey between the two teams.
Well, I mean, I just think about the round robin game between these two teams earlier this week. I mean, that was a game that, shot wise was heavily dominated by the United States. But Marie-Philippe Poulin was the difference maker, and her along with Brianne Jenner and Sarah Nurse on that top line were dominant when they needed it. And the thing about Marie-Philippe Poulin is that she has just been a player that, when her team needs it the most in the biggest moments, she has raised her level of play beyond everybody else on the ice and got it done, not maybe entirely herself, but essentially been the difference maker. And, when you put it up, I mean, she's one of the most clutch athletes I've ever seen in my life. And another opportunity to make history tonight, dating back to, her heroics in 2010. We're now 4 Olympics later, and she's still getting it done. So I cannot wait for this game tonight. Do not miss it, folks. If you like great hockey, I mean, the game earlier this tournament between Canada and the United States was phenomenal, and I think this one tonight will be even better. You did mention that prop bet on Philippe Poulin to score the OT winner. We talked about this a little bit yesterday on the Lock Shop, and I think on this program, but the odds, the 3-way odds in this game, a draw, which would be a tie at the end of regulation, is plus 350. needless to say, I mean, I'd love to lose the bet and just have Canada run away with it. I don't know how realistic that is. But they do have a prop, Remo. Marie-Philippe Poulin to score the OT winner, 19-1 right now. I did put a little sprinkle on that, and I wouldn't be surprised if as we get closer to game time, that number comes down quite a bit, because I think there'll be quite a bit of action on it, considering that's pretty much what she does. Win big games in overtime off of her stick.
Yeah, and we hope to see that again tonight. So 10-10, got my my clock set here after the Jets game. Rush home, put it on, or go to your favorite, location. And yeah, great night of hockey tonight. Has the 6 p.m. full building back for Canada Life Center. It's going to be a great atmosphere.
All right, well, let's get to it actually, because we will have Greg Ellingson come on, and then we'll talk more about the plight of the Jets going into this game. But, as I speculated yesterday, I really did think that, between the way Logan Stanley played in the game against the Chicago Blackhawks in his first game back, and the fact that the Minnesota Wild are coming here in a foul mood, and this could very well be arguably the most physical game of the season. I'm not surprised that Ville Heinola is out and Logan Stanley is in today, with, of course, the return of Neil Pionk. We talked about it yesterday. I mean, Greenway saying that, Winnipeg better be ready because we're coming for it. I mean, there was plenty of fisticuffs in the last game. And, it's basically been Adam Lowry fighting for the Winnipeg Jets. Brendan Dillon got in there. And I think the combination of the way Logan Stanley looked and the way he played in the game against Chicago, as well as the potential that a big 6'7" guy might be a benefit to the Winnipeg Jets in this game, he's going to get the call tonight. And as well as Austin Pugnansky coming in for Evgeny Svechnikov, the two changes due to a coach's choice. And then, of course, as we mentioned, Neil Pionk coming into the lineup.
Yeah, other than that, the lines are the same. Connor Dubois, Perfetti, Stasny, Shafley, Wheeler, Kopp, Lowry, Reichel, and as you said, Poganski going with Harkins and Tony Nato. So the Jets looking maybe for some size. Coach saying he likes Poganski's straight line play. Think it's going to be more physical, and your defense, Morrissey. I don't even know if they're practicing line rushes, but Morrissey, DeMello, Dillon, Schmidt, Stanley, Pionk. I'm sure they'll be shuffling those around. So, shout out to Neil Pionk coming back in the lineup. Had to, sit out because of the quarantine rules. So I think that'll definitely be a boost. But Minnesota Wildcats, they are coming in very hot. 8-1-1 in their last 10. Of course, one of those losses was here last week to Winnipeg. They're a deep team. Got, bunch of lines that can score, solid defensively, solid goaltending. And, we're going to have to see that intensity from the Jets here early on. It's not going to have to be like, Marcus Foligno comes and hits you, and then you get fired up. I think they have to bring it from the start. And hope you can play a game like you did last week, try and replicate that. But it seems like easier said than done with the Jets, who, some games show up, play the right way, get a win. And then other games, it's just not quite on that level.
Yeah, well, and we talked about this, in the aftermath of the Chicago game. The Jets aren't a team that seems to dictate anything to anyone. I mean, they sort of see who they're playing, and, if they can do what they normally like to do, they'll do that. And that is play maybe a bit more of a freewheeling skating game. And that was right into the hands of the Chicago Blackhawks, and they were more than happy to do that. And I don't think it really benefited the Winnipeg Jets. The Jets' best games this year have been when they have been forced into tighter defensive structure. And to be honest, answering the physicality of their opponents. And we saw it against St. Louis, heading into the break. It didn't follow up in Philly by any stretch of the imagination. And coming out of the All-Star break with the win over Minnesota here in Winnipeg, which was one of the best games of the season. The only time they've won a game, I believe, all year when scoring 2 goals or less. And then, the way they followed it up in Dallas, losing an OT, and then the comeback win in Nashville against a team that was rough, taking a lot of penalties, and the Jets were disciplined but made them pay for it. And that, I think, the way they played over those 3 games is what made the performance on, Monday on Valentine's Day so disappointing for Jet fans. It wasn't like they didn't try and they didn't, do some things well. but it just seemed to really be lacking that energy and emotion that, from my perspective, Remis brought out the best in the Winnipeg Jets, or in those 3 games heading into Monday.
Yes, I agree with you. You saw the game, these emotional divisional games against an opponent that's higher in the standings. Like, they know they need to bring it for Nashville last week. You need to bring it against St. Louis. You need to bring it against Minnesota. But when it's, teams lower than you in the standings for the Jets, although I can't really knock. Well, that first game against Arizona, yeah, I can knock Arizona or Buffalo. Again, we went through the list earlier this week. Chicago, it just doesn't have that same intensity. And now with a full building, I think it's going to be a lot similar. Because last week it was like, okay, you got half capacity now, and people were fired up. Now it's full capacity, and Wheeler's talked about it. Called it exhibition feel or preseason feel when you're playing. It's 250 or no fans. And I think the crowd. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, I was going to say that, and that was certainly the feeling. I went to both of the last 2 games in the stands. I went to the Minnesota game and I went to the Chicago game, and they were like, the atmosphere in the building was night and day. Now, listen, granted, it was a Monday, it was an 8 p.m. start, it was Valentine's Day. Maybe there were a fewer people in the building, but the bottom line is what was happening on the ice was not doing anything close to bringing anyone out of their seats. The competition and the way the Jets stepped up against the Minnesota Wild in that first game out of the break did that. And I mean, the atmosphere in the building was night and day. That game did not feel like empty, cavernous arena with only a few thousand people there and, a lack of intensity on the ice. Far from it. We did sort of have that feeling on Monday. And I mean, God knows we spend enough time about, trying to get the Winnipeg Jets to build off performances and do things consistently. That hasn't happened. But I'll tell you what, they're not going to have much choice, because if they don't answer the Minnesota Wild tonight with what they're bringing, it could look like, well, that embarrassment 7-1 game on, Black Friday earlier this year, as opposed to one of the best games of the season for the Winnipeg Jets behind a Connor Hellebuck shutout last week. And, to me, not only is this a big test to see if they can replicate a performance like that against a very good opponent, but Reem, as we've been illustrating on this program, every day, checking out what the odds are. Dallas won in Colorado last night. Edmonton won last night. I mean, the Jets aren't getting any help. I mean, and they have so much work to do to begin with. I mean, games like this, to be honest, are pretty much mandatory. Never mind tomorrow against Seattle, and then a head-to-head matchup against Edmonton right now. If you're not getting points most nights out, we're going to be talking about the trade deadline in a few weeks, and I think there are still some people that are holding out hope that the Jets can make this interesting.
Yeah, I don't want to be the bearer of bad news, but I'm looking at the, season projections from Dom at The Athletic. He's got the Jets right now at 92% to miss.
I think it's 90.
Sorry, 90. Yeah, I can't read. That's a really small font. 90% to miss the playoffs. So, doing some simple math, that's a 10% chance to make the playoffs, and not the position we thought that we would be in here as we, head towards the trade deadline, which I've said it before. I said to you, we talk about going to the draft. Well, I don't know if the Jets are going to have a first-round pick. Now it's like, well, they be having more than one first-round pick.
Dude, yeah, well, as I said, I mean, I remember the first week of the season and people were talking about Andrew Kopp's situation, and I said, listen, guys, if we're talking about trading Andrew Kopp at the deadline, that's a terrible situation, because that means this season has gone to an area that no one is expecting, especially general manager Kevin Cheveldayoff. And unfortunately, right now, you just rolled up the numbers that that is sort of the way things are looking right now. All that being said, there's a lot of hockey before the 21st or the 19th of March, whatever the date is, beginning tonight with a 6 p.m. puck drop down at Canada Life Center against the Minnesota Wild. Looking forward to Tim Campbell's perspective on that a little bit later on. But we're going to talk some football. Exciting times last week with the addition of Greg Ellingson. He's going to join us in just a minute. Before we do that, I want to give a big thank you to F Apparel. Great to have F Apparel on board with us on Winnipeg Sports Talk. They are, of course, the locally owned go-to spot for custom suits for men. You saw Kenny dropping his beautiful F Apparel shot on national TV in the game. I think it's a Sportsnet game tonight, so maybe we'll have a double dose of a little K&R on the national note and I guarantee you he'll be wearing one of his F Apparel suits. They've got it all, full line of custom clothing for any occasion, in addition to suits, dress shirts, winter jackets, chinos, golf pants, untucked dress shirts, and more. Bottom line is every guy needs at least one suit that fits and looks great, and F's custom-made suits start at just $400. They're also the top choice in Winnipeg for wedding and grad suits. If you have a big event coming up and you need to look great, F is here for you. And wedding parties will get 15% off if your group gets your suits from F Apparel. 190 Smith Street, downtown. Online, F, that's EPHapparel.com. It is Heart Month, of course, and Vita Health Fresh Market is your go-to spot for healthy heart supplements and foods. Not to mention Winnipeg's best selection and best prices on natural and organic supplements, beauty products, and groceries, as well as the delicious lunch options with their grab-and-go Vita Market salads, soups, sandwiches, and more. You can join the exclusive Vita VIP list by texting 1-877-630-1970 to receive special offers all year long and be entered to win a $100 Vita Health gift card. Vita Health Fresh Market, 7 Winnipeg locations, including the newest store in Linden Ridge, and online at myvita.ca. And listen, while we're keeping the ticker maybe a little healthier and eating well, it all starts with hydration, and our friends at Culligan Water are the go-to people for all things water in Winnipeg and southern Manitoba. Family-owned for 65 years. Water softeners, filters, bottled water coolers, whole home systems, and drinking water systems, not to mention citywide water delivery services. And if you do need water for your business, commercial, and industrial water products and solutions as well, give Keenan a call over at 694-5180. You can go visit the gang down at 1200 Sargent Avenue or find out more online at drinkculligan.com. All right. We'll get back to the Jets a little later on. Tonight's gold medal game between Canada and the United States. Also, Mitch Peacock is going to be popping into the program. But right now, let's welcome in new Winnipeg Blue Bombers receiver Greg Ellingson to the show. Greg, what's up? How are you?
Hey, how's it going? Thanks for having me. I'm good. Just kind of finished a workout. It's pretty, it's pretty warm down here in Florida, but I'll try to send some sunshine up your way during the spring.
Yeah, let's just say you did a good thing on maybe not coming here in person to sign right now. I'm glad they went to you because that made it cost you a little bit more to come here in Winnipeg and handle what we've got right now. But things are going to be warming up when things get going next year for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. If you can, Greg, tell us about the decision. I mean, you obviously had a lot of interest, and you talked to the Bombers before about potentially coming here. How did it end up that you're going to be in blue and gold next year?
They did a really good job of reaching out to me and making me feel like I was valued and wanted there. Kyle Walters, O'Shea, Buck Pierce, they did a good job of communicating and making sure that they knew that, I was going to add value to the team. And, at the end of the day, I think as a player, aside from the logistics of football and where you are, to be known as, to feel like you're in a family and a valued asset to the team is what you really want, because you want to come in there, you want to play for the guys around you, your teammates, and you also want to play for the coaches and the people that help run that organization. So they definitely did a good job of making me feel that way. So that was one of the major factors why I ended up going to Winnipeg.
Greg, you've been in this league for a while. The Bombers haven't always been on top of the mountain, to say the least. What's it been like watching what's happened here in Winnipeg over the last couple seasons from elsewhere in the division?
Yeah, I guess every team has its highs and lows, a little bit of a roller coaster in the CFL because one year you're on fire and the next year not. But Winnipeg definitely is been on top of that mountain for a while, just like you said. And I think there's a lot of admiration for that team. How they run things, how they perform on the field, how they end up just battling and fighting through games to come out with a win. You see that week after week in the CFL the past 2 years, and it's also going to be really exciting to get back with some of the guys that I played there with before. Zach, I have a relationship with from the Hamilton days, and a couple other guys on that team. Nick Taylor, he went to FIU, actually played basketball back then. So I didn't really see him on the football field, but I've played with him for a few teams in Ottawa and in Edmonton. So, once you're around the CFL for long enough, you kind of get to know all the faces and personalities around the league. So it'll be exciting to fit in a new locker room, but still have some of that familiarity.
Greg, you mentioned Zach Collaros. Tell us about reuniting with a guy that you kind of were catching passes from when you first came north of the border.
Yeah, we had a good connection when I was in Hamilton, and it kind of was short lived because I ended up going to Ottawa the next year while he remained there, and then I had a few of those injuries, and that's a testament to him and his mental strength and his athleticism to bounce back from those injuries and get some more opportunities to show what he can do. And I mean, the last 2 years he's been on fire. So, as a receiver, why wouldn't you want to show him the capabilities that he had in the past that he's, shown he could bring back to the table right now and help the team win 2 Grey Cups back to back.
His story has been incredible. I mean, he came here in a trade at the deadline in 2019 for some insurance, played 1 regular season game, and frankly has become a legend here in Winnipeg with back-to-back Grey Cups and now a new contract. I mean, what do you remember about playing with Zach, and what makes you excited to get back together with him here in Winnipeg next season?
I remember some of the similar things that you see there right now with how he plays, the way he can extend the pocket and, he can kind of shift around and make defenders miss and, extend the play downfield so that guys can get open so that he can make those explosive plays happen. Because, especially in the CFL, you have all that room to, bounce around as a quarterback. You can make a couple guys mix, get out of the pocket, and you leave a lot of time for those receivers to run around and make defenders, in a little bit of a tornado and get lost. And then next thing you know, you have a guy popping open, for a 60-yard touchdown if a quarterback can push it down the field. And, he's shown that he can do that. He's shown that he can extend the plays and have that capability of getting outside the pocket. And, I mean, also he just always did pushing the ball down the field last year. He wasn't afraid to give his receivers a chance. And that's something that you have to build trust with, which I look forward to do with him more in camp. We had that little bit of chemistry back in Hamilton, but I'm really pumped to get there and get those things rolling so that, next year we can see a lot of that winning again like you guys did last year.
Greg Ellingson with us here on Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily. Greg, let me ask you about the courting process. Were you just talking with Kyle Walters at all, or who else reached out to you? Did you speak with Mike O'Shea? And what were sort of the things that really said, this is the spot for me in 2022?
Actually, I guess Kyle Walters just called me actually about 30 minutes ago and made sure that he wanted to, just say that he's appreciative for, me coming to the team. And, we talked the past 2 years kind of about me coming to Winnipeg, and it was always in the mix. And, just let him know that I'm, happy to finally be there and we can finally get it done after, the past couple of years us kind of missing on that mark. So he just definitely reached out and just, let me know that, he is happy to have me there. And, through free agency, he was pretty busy with signing all the other guys that he didn't have a chance to reach out yet, but he did. And yeah, during free agency, O'Shea and Buck Pierce, they made sure they called me and talked to me and let me know that, I was a value and an asset to the team that they wanted and bring some leadership and some experience to the receiver room. And, I'm pumped to meet those guys. I mean, you got ballers over there already, Densky and Waltarski, and you just re-signed Bailey too. I mean, he's a guy that's, coming up too and shown that he could play. So it'll be fun to get in that room. And, all those guys from what I've seen love to grind. They go out there and they grind every game, whether it's in the run game blocking for the guys or in the screen game, making sure that, somebody pops loose and gets downfield and sticks with their blocks. I mean, that's how I love to play. I love to play for the guys around me, whether it's my time to shine and make a play or whether it's the guy next to me, if I could help in any way, whether it's taking off the coverage or blocking the person in front of me in the run game. I mean, whatever it takes. And that's something that I think is part of the, characteristics of that Winnipeg football team the past 2 years is being able to grind for each other. And I'm pumped to be a part of it.
You just mentioned your teammates in that. Those receiving meetings, there should be a reality show just of that group next year, because I can tell you, I mean, Dembski's a great Winnipeg guy, just an awesome dude. Wolotarski's one of the more unique individuals. He's probably doing like street poetry somewhere in Portland right now. I mean, that's sort of his. Yeah,
I just saw him. I think he maybe had a ukulele or something at the beach. I believe I saw one of his stories.
Yeah, for sure.
It seems like a cool dude.
Busking going later on. And Showtime Sheed, maybe the most intense dude we've ever met. We had him on the program last week or the week before. I mean, he was a hit to say the least. It is going to be great. But I mean, what's the key? I mean, many receivers in professional football sometimes has reputations of being divas or being me first guys. For a receiver group, what's the core to you guys working together well, gelling, and having a little bit of that selflessness that sometimes maybe you'll be taking 2 guys in coverage that's going to leave an open spot for a teammate?
Yeah, I think you hit on it there. It's the selflessness. I mean, I've preached this from when I was in Ottawa when we had 2 years of 4,000-yard receivers. Everybody wants to eat. Everybody wants their opportunity to shine. But I think that's what it comes down to is, really making sure you play for the guys around you, knowing that when the opportunity does arise, that you've just prepared the right way throughout practice and throughout the weeks prior, that your time's going to come to be that guy for the team, that the ball's going to come your way and that you're going to have to make that play. And for not only you to believe that, but for the guys around you to believe that, so that you put in the work every week to make sure that, you've proven that to your teammates and that everybody can trust you on the field, whether it's, studying the playbooks or putting that work in throughout the week. I think that's what it really boils down to, is you're going to have games where you have, I remember having games with one catch and like -6 yards. And then the next week, no catches, but still winning football games. And then the next week you might have 12 for 200 yards. You never really know where the ball is going to go, because the defense is going to dictate that a lot. So I think as a receiver, you have to be unselfish. You have to know that you're going to have that time to shine, and then you're not going to have that time to shine. And when you don't, you can't eat yourself up and, beat yourself up about, not getting the ball and about it being me and like, I need the ball now and this. It's going to come. And I think everybody knows that. And when you have your receiver room that can understand that it's everybody's time, when it is, and that you're prepared for it, is when it really develops that culture of winning and that unselfishness, and that you're playing for the guys around you. And that's what it's about. And that's why you see, Winnipeg win back-to-back. When I was in Ottawa and, we had our success, that's what it was about. You have an unselfish room that everybody's playing for each other around you, and no one's getting mad when they're not getting the ball, because they know that time's going to come. And when that time comes, everybody around them and them, and then they stay true to themselves and know that they're going to make that play.
So much of that seems to start here in Winnipeg with head coach Mike O'Shea. And you mentioned you've got some contacts here and you spoke to him a little bit, but what did you know about Mike, and why does he seem to be so damn popular with his players, other than getting the most out of them and winning a couple rings?
Honestly, that's one of the things that I'm excited about. I don't really know. I've seen from a distance. I know the guys love to play for him. And I know that he was a player before, and people respected how he played the game. And from a distance, I've always liked his, his demeanor and his just energy always seemed like pretty focused, and he's never too high or too low. And as a player, that's how I am. I never get too high up on myself. I never get too low. I like to say even, because like we just talked about, like you need to keep yourself in check so that you can perform right. If you're too much in your head and you let, maybe the crowd get to you, or the noise or the moment get too big, then, it's too much. But if you can just revert back to those times when, things are even and you've already been through this before, and you can really, stay even keeled, then I think that's when you have success. And I've seen him do that a lot from the sideline, just, watch his demeanor and how he, interacts with his, his players and his coaches. And that's something that I think I've admired from afar. And he's definitely one of the coaches in the league that I've always thought and told people before, like that's a guy I think I'd, love to play for. And I'm finally going to get that opportunity. So I just want to go in there and, not only him, but my teammates around me, prove that I belong there and prove that I can be a guy there and help the team win as much as I can.
Greg, I know it's all eyes on 2022, but I do want to ask you quickly about last season. I mean, you mentioned you're a guy that, wants to, and your job is there to help your team win. But the team didn't win. And it was a very disappointing season for the Elks. Your 5 straight seasons of 1,000 yards was broken. I mean, when you look back on last season, I mean, was it just a culmination of a lot of bad things happening at the same time that took a team with a ton of talent on it that sort of had them underperform?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's definitely a good way to put it. We had a lot of things bad. I mean, that's kind of football, right? You get that momentum in one direction or the other, and you get the momentum in a good way. Like, for example, Winnipeg had, where you're winning games and you're battling through and you're seeing those fruits from the hard work that you're putting in, come to fruition when you're winning all these games and they're stacking up. And then I think we kind of had the opposite of that. We, bad special teams play here, missed opportunity getting into the end zone and just settling for a field goal on offense, or maybe giving up a play. And then, you have guys with their morale down a little bit when those losses start stacking up, and it almost gets contagious. And, even though you're battling out there, it just seems like you can't get out of that hole. And I think last year we just kind of dug ourselves into that hole, and it was really hard to get out of it. But, you need to go through those experiences to really appreciate the good ones, right? So, even though it wasn't a great season, and personally or as a team, ready for the bounce back. And I know what that's like, and I don't want to be there again.
Greg Ellingson of the Bombers with us here on Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily. One of the other things we've heard from a number of the players that have come here, as well as the guys that decide to stick around, was the atmosphere in Winnipeg, the way this team was supported. I'm sure you saw this from the visitors' side of things, but how impressed were you with the way this team is supported, the passion that this city has for the team, and how much did that help in getting you into blue?
I think it's pretty well known that Winnipeg is one of the, that stadium, that crowd is one of the desirable places to, be the home team. And they definitely make it tougher on the visitors when you're there. You definitely hear a lot of chirps coming out of that tunnel. And I don't know, I'm honestly I'm pumped to see this. I want to see the biggest beer snake I've ever seen in my life when I get there and they hang that banner for the second year that y'all won back to back. Like, I'm pumped for that part.
Well, I'll tell you what, just wait. If you can get it done. The party here after the team wins is all timers as well. First, it was a parade. Last year was at the stadium. And next year, if we've got this pandemic in the background, there'll almost be 3 years worth of partying. Hopefully you get it done. But it all starts with one win, and there's a long ways to go. You know what? Listen, I've had a lot of people, by the way, tons of people welcome you to Winnipeg in the chat. Bomber fans really fired up to have you a part of the team. I'm wondering about you. Like, first of all, how'd you celebrate? You got a new deal. You're down there at home in Florida. What'd you do when you finally put pen to paper and know that you're a Winnipeg Blue Bomber?
Honestly, not much yet. I actually have a couple of my teammates from Edmonton in town that they're hitting workouts with me down where I work out. I've been with the same trainer for like 8 years at Trench Academy down here in Tampa. So they just flew in today. So I celebrated with the workout with those guys, and then I'm going to show them around Tampa a little bit. So I think that's, for me, that's how I like celebrating. I like being around my family, my friends, and, having that close relationship with them and, celebrate with the people that you love and you care about. And that's really what means the most to me. So that's the way I like to do it. I didn't do anything grand. I'm not going to go on an extravagant trip or, buy maybe I'll get some toys, actually. I think he's fiending for maybe a little groom and nail cut. He's back here just chilling on the couch.
I was about to say, he looks like the most well-behaved roommate you've got. Just he's a master of the chill zone.
Come here. Come on. He'll come over here in a second and he'll say hi. But yeah, maybe I'll grab him some treats and stuff. I think he'll be happy with maybe a T-bone, nice little ribeye. He usually likes those things.
What kind of a dog is he?
He's a Great Dane Mastiff. Yeah, he's a Great Dane Mastiff. He's 4 years old, but he'll be down there in Winnipeg, and he'll be sporting Bomber colors, and we'll get him. I think I need to get him a new collar, though. He's got an orange one on now. Maybe a nice blue and gold one will look good on him.
Everyone here in Winnipeg is laughing about you saying, well, I'm not going to celebrate and take a big trip. Everyone wants to take a trip to where you are right now because of the weather. Tell us about the offseason for Greg Ellingson. I mean, what's the day-to-day like for you back home while you're enjoying the nice weather in the winter and preparing for another CFL season?
Yeah, actually, it's just starting to get really nice here. We're about to be high 80s all week for the next 2 weeks. So I think that's about 28 degrees for you, I believe, somewhere around there. But yeah, that's why I had some guys come in town to come train with me because, like I said, around being in the CFL for so long, you meet a lot of guys and you're going to stay friends with them. Whether you switch teams or not, you're still going to see them on the field. You're going to see them when you go to away games or they come to your town to play. So I have good relationships with a lot of guys, around the league. So I have like 2 or 3 buddies that are coming to train with me for 2 weeks. And that's the day-to-day, get up in the morning, take the pooch for a walk. Down here, there's a little boardwalk along the river that I like to go to. There's like a wooded area that he likes to go to, and then, go over to workouts at D1, the Trench Academy. And that's usually from around, 8 to 9-ish is like treatment and get ready. And then 9, we hit the field. 11 o'clock, we hit the weight room, and I'm usually home by like 1 or 2. That's a typical day of Greg Ellingson in Tampa, Florida. Hey,
Greg, tell us about your background in Tampa. I mean, anyone that's been down to Florida knows that, Friday is Friday Night Lights, Saturday is FSU and the Gators and college football, and then Sunday, now there's 3 NFL teams. It seems like football is almost sort of a religion like hockey is up here in Canada. Tell us a little bit about getting into the game and your path that ended up bringing you to the Canadian Football League eventually.
Yeah, from a young age, I, eat, sleep, drink, everything is football, It doesn't matter what it is. I remember, just sitting out in the streets in childhood and all the kids from the neighborhood are just, running around on the asphalt, on pavement, playing football, saying this mailbox is the end zone and that basketball hoop over there is the other end zone. And, just pause games when cars have to drive by. And, that's how I grew up, just back alleys. I remember there's a little dirt patch that we called the cut, and that's where we would play tackle football because we were allowed to, get down and dirty over there in the sand and come home as long as before the street lights went on. And, my dad was happy about that. But I grew up that way. And then obviously the path was high school football after playing the TBYFL is what we have here. So the Tampa Bay Youth Football League. So we did that. And then I went over to college at FIU and played 4 years there, and bounced around a bit with the Buccaneers and Jacksonville Jaguars, and played arena football in between that with the Tampa Bay Storm and New Orleans Voodoo. And then had an opportunity with Danny McManus, actually. I reached out the best I could to every team in the CFL, called them, emailed them. My agent at the time had stopped responding to me because I assumed he lost hope in my football career. So I kind of became my own agent for a moment there. And Danny McManus was one of the few people in Hamilton that responded to me, and happened to be in St. Pete. And I went to a local high school, and he was slinging the ball around to me. I'm like, who is this older guy that's like 50 years old, and he's really firing this pigskin? He really got something to him. And he gave me a tryout and threw it around, and he was one of the scouts for Hamilton at the time. And he just said, he's like, yeah, man, I like you. If we need a receiver for camp, I'll definitely put your name in there. And I guess the cards fell how they did, and they ended up getting some guys that year, and they brought me in for camp, and that's kind of history from that.
You came in and just had a monster rookie season. I mean, what do you remember about coming to the Canadian Football League at first? And did you know much about it? I mean, it is a different game than what you'd played your entire life. I mean, was there any special preparation for that? And why do you think it went so well for you in the first year? And obviously, you've had an incredible career ever since.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, no, I didn't know much about the CFL. I knew I loved playing football. I was playing, at University at FIU, and then we had our bowl game in Detroit. And I remember being close to Canada, and some of the guys traveling over the border to go to Canada when we were in Detroit. And I was like, oh, I mean, I don't have a passport, so I can't really do that, but it sounds tempting. And then I think what really prepared me for Hamilton and the CFL and the Waggle was playing arena football. So, even though it's not ideal for a lot of guys, that really helped me carve my path to success in the CFL. Because in arena football, you have one guy that waggles downfield. There's only one receiver that's allowed to, and there's usually 3 receivers on the field. There's less guys, and I was that guy in arena. So, those 18 games that I played in arena football, I think really set me up for going into camp, knowing and understanding how to use my waggle, and really set me up for winning a job in camp and becoming a starter in Hamilton my first year.
I'm glad you brought up arena football, because I mean, I noticed that you played your first year in New Orleans in 2012, and anyone that's been down in New Orleans knows that's a kind of like, if you go there and you're like, am I even in North America right now? It seems like it's almost at times from another planet. But what was that experience like, both from a football aspect and being a young professional living in a place like New Orleans?
Man, seems like so long ago, but it was a great experience. I mean, at that time I was like just happy to be on a team. I mean, I think I was making $200 a game, like just doing whatever I could to get filmed, to be able to keep playing football, to hopefully impress somebody, so that I hopefully have an opportunity somewhere. So I packed up my car at the time. I mean, I didn't have much. I think before I ended up signing with that team by driving an hour and a half to Orlando, the kind of same situation as Danny McManus, and just working out for the coach at the time, who was also a former quarterback. And then he signed me from there. And then I just packed my car up. I think I was washing airplanes at a private airport here just to make money, and bartending a little bit on the side. And I just drove to New Orleans and hoped for the best, and played, I think it was 8 games there. And then got a tryout with the Buccaneers the next week, and I flew to Tampa. And then after my tryouts, there's about 8 receivers there around the NFL and a couple other guys, and they signed me on the spot. Flew back to New Orleans, and then drove down to Tampa back to my home, basically, to have an opportunity to play for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
Pretty cool. And now you've become a mainstay and a household name in a lot of CFL markets, and now coming to the back-to-back champs here in Winnipeg to look for a three-peat. Going to be real fun, Greg. People are asking, I mean, outside of football, what keeps you going? What are you into? What's Greg Ellingson when you're away from the football field?
I think I hit on it a little bit. I think part of it is, this guy over here on the couch. Love that guy to death, and like doing things with him, kind of bring him anywhere I can go, especially around Tampa. There's a lot of dog friendly places. So I like to get out and be active. And like I hit on before, just, my family, my friends, it's really something that I value, and spending time with people that care about you and that I care about, and, seeing those people happy in my life. And aside from that, like the more adventurous stuff, I'm very adventurous. So I like to challenge myself in different ways. I mean, I love surfing. Costa Rica, I've been surfing there a few times. Went to Bali, went to surf camp there for about a week and a half. That was pretty amazing, and have quite a few crazy stories about the tides there and the surf, and it's a little bit scary, but it's also a challenge. So that's something I like to do. Yeah, I like that a little bit of adrenaline rush, and I think that's something away from football that you miss out on. You have to find some other places, right? So I did that, zip lining, bungee jumping, then skydiving. So done a bunch of stuff that, kind of gets your blood boiling and challenges yourself a little bit, especially when you're scared to do something, right? When you're in a plane and you're 30,000 feet up high and you're thinking about jumping out, you really question a lot of things. But when I think when you have that fear and you really push yourself past the edge, you grow a little bit. So that's something I like to do in lots of facets of life.
What about video games? Rashid was telling us he strictly plays Call of Duty, nothing else. I know a lot of guys are into Madden. Is that part of the routine at times with friends and teammates?
Yeah, I already like the guy. I'm in the same boat. I'm gonna have to hit him up after this interview and tell him to get on tonight because I'm on my computer right now actually. But I got a nice little setup here, and I like playing Call of Duty mostly as well. Warzone is what I usually get on. So. Jellyman82. So if anybody's listening and wants to, add me and play some games sometime, I'm definitely down. I like to do that with my friends. It's also a great way to, keep up with your friends because you can just put a headset on and you can chat while you're playing a game, and it's like a phone call, but you're being interactive with it. So that's something I definitely enjoy, and I'm also like try to be well balanced. Like if I'm playing a bunch of video games for hours, then I'm like, okay, I need to get outside and I need to, be active for a couple hours and balance. And it's like, okay, I'm too active. I'm too much in the technology. Let me read a book let me go through a book this month. And like, I try to keep myself very spread out so that, a little jack of all trades is kind of my motto and kind of how I live.
Well, I'll tell you what, producer Remis behind the scenes, we've been working. We're going to be doing some head-to-head golfing online. But, we may have to get a Showtime sheet, Greg Ellingson, maybe a couple fans or listeners in, and we can do a massive WST stream of you guys taking suckers out on Warzone after a big win sometime on a day off.
My Twitch up, and I'll do a stream, and we'll all get on there one day.
Hey, dude, this has been so much fun. Bomber fans are really excited to see you in blue and gold. Congratulations on the new deal. Can't wait to get this season going. Have a great rest of the off season. Continued success working out. Give an extra bone to the pup or maybe a nice piece of meat for how well behaved he was throughout this, although he seems like he's probably like that pretty much 24/7. And can't wait to see you here in Winnipeg.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Give me a shout anytime. I'd love to be back on the show again.
Our pleasure. We'll do it again. Book it. Thanks so much, Greg. There it is. Greg Ellingson fired up to be a Blue Bomber. And guys, I know the last season in Edmonton wasn't a great one for he or the Elks. When you think about the quarterbacks we're playing there, Ellingson was still, an average reception of 14.6, 687 yards. But the 5 years before that, 1,061, 1,260, 1,459, 1,086 and 1,170, and consistently a big time player in the playoffs as well. So Bombers, they've lost some great players. Kenny Lawler is obviously going to be a big hole in the lineup, but there's no question marks about Greg Ellingson. And as he mentioned right off the top of the interview, a great connection with former Blue Bomber, or former Ticat and now Blue Bomber quarterback one, Zach Calero. So big thanks to Greg for joining us on the program. Cannot wait for the upcoming season. We're going to get back to the Jets. Big one tonight against the Minnesota Wild. While we do that, a big thank you to our friends over at Manitoba Battery. Donnie and the guys, of course, the premier stop for all your battery needs in Winnipeg and Manitoba. Most automotive batteries are priced for less than $100 with Core Exchange, or they'll deliver it to your door anywhere in Winnipeg for $115 on the same day you order it, as long as you let them know by 1:30 p.m. And it does look like it's not going to be completely subarctic on the weekend. Might be a good time for you people that like ice fishing to get outside. Of course, Manitoba Battery has all the flasher batteries you need to keep you catching fish for the rest of the season. Get on down for all your battery needs to Manitoba Battery, 1026 Logan Avenue. You can ring them up at 783-8787 or hit them up online at manitobabattery.com. Did see a bunch of the championship merch is in for you Rams fans, and you know where it is. Royal Sports at 750 Pembina Highway. Rams championship gear, 4 new exclusive versions of Blue Bomber Championship hats, also at Royal, not to mention thousands of pieces of Winnipeg Jets merchandise, including many exclusives to Royal, not to mention the massive hockey department, goalie department, snowboards, fitness, and more, and all the cool stuff over on the Kings Skate, Snow, and Surf side. Royal Sports, your one-stop shop for all things sports. If you're watching on YouTube, there you have it. Undisputable champions. Super Bowl champion Rams gear. It's all there at Royal Sports at 750 Pembina Highway, and follow them on Instagram at Royal Sports Pembina for the latest merchandise drops and sale information. And of course, a thank you to our friends at Not Auto Corp, who have been keeping us on the road for years here on Winnipeg Sports Talk. And prior to that, back at our old spot, Not is the place to go if you're looking for a new vehicle. Why not get into the car of your dreams at an incredible price with the help of the Not team? Amazing vehicles on site. And if there's a particular car, make, and model you're looking for, let them know the experts at Not will source it, find it, and get it to you here for the best possible price. Not AutoCorp, Waverly and McGillivray, and online at not.ca. And don't forget about the new Winnipeg Car Lab as well, now open, doing tinting, striping, wraps, and more, all also on the Not lot. Let's get to some Jets talk. Thanks again to Greg Ellingson for joining us. It's put up or shut up time for the Winnipeg Jets right now. Tough loss after a pretty nice start coming out of the All-Star break. Let's discuss it going into tonight's 6 o'clock puck drop with the Wild with Tim Campbell of NHL.com. Tim, thanks for doing this. How are you?
Excellent. And I'm supposed to pass along greetings. I had lunch with our colleague, Mr. Lawless, last week while I was in Edmonton, and he said to be sure to say hello next time I saw you.
Wonderful. Well, great to hear from Gary. Gary's been gallivanting all over the place. I saw him. He was on, did you see he was on some ATVs and UTVs and Tahoe on the weekend? Just more of the champagne and caviar world of our good friend, one Gary Lawless. That being said, he's working for a team that's in a very good spot right now. I mean, Jack Eichel is, I guess, making his debut tonight for the Vegas Golden Knights, a big hockey story. That being said, here in Winnipeg, Tim, coming out of the break, I think we spent quite a bit of time talking about the plight that the uphill battle that the Jets had to make the playoffs after the first 42 games. And it started quite well. One of the best games of the season, a 2-0 win against the Wild to start things off. Squeezed a point out of Dallas and a big comeback win on Nashville. And it all of a sudden, 5 out of possible 6 against tough teams in the division. A lot of optimism. A lot of that was burnt quickly on Monday night with, sort of lethargic loss to the Chicago Blackhawks. I mean, have you figured this team out yet, Tim? I mean, or is this still one of those teams where, see how they come out and then we'll talk about what Jets team we're seeing?
Yeah, have I figured this out yet? Not a chance, because if I had, I would, excuse me, I would have far more important things to do today than to be talking about one team or, tonight's game. So they remain a mystery to me, Huss. The only thing I would say to the diehard faithful out there who kind of, live and die on every game and every period is, like, we know it's in there, this quality game that is required in the Central Division. We saw them play it multiple times last week. It's in there. They can do it. It's not a reach to ask them to do it. But, I don't know if Monday night was that classic, return from a road trip, have trouble summoning it up kind of game. Did it have something to do with Marc-Andre Fleury? What is it that makes those nights happen? Because there have been quite a bit, too many of them for my liking, if we're going to be talking about the Jets as a playoff team. And, I do have some colleagues and some really passionate friends. I had some dinners, I would say, in the past 2 to 3 weeks, and lots of Jets talk, which it's almost more than normal because people are kind of anxious. And one thing that always seems to come up, anybody I'm talking to, is goaltending. I mean, Connor Hellebuck has lots of fans out there. He has a few detractors. And the one thing for me this year, when I, look at his contribution or, how much of a factor he is as to what's going on, is I don't think he's played poorly this season, really. Every goal he lets in kind of goofy, odd goals. But there have been an inordinate number of nights this year, Huss, where Connor Hellebuyck is the second best goalie in a game. And I think that was the case again on Monday here. He did not play poorly, but I don't know why the Jets run into this so much this season, but the guy at the other end, whether his name is Fleury or Skinner or, whoever,
Vamelka
seems to have been just that little bit better, and it makes a difference in games. It's a fine line in the NHL between winning and losing, as you know. It's not as black and white as a lot of fans would like to tell you. And that's been one factor for me. I don't know how you fix that. But again, it's probably just in little increments.
No, it's a great point, Tim, and it's something that we spent some time talking about yesterday. I mean, I believe the stat coming out of the game is that when the Jets score 2 goals or less, they're 1-16-4. And, there was a period of time earlier in the season where Connor Hellebuyck gave up 2 goals or less in 8 or 9 straight games, and the Jets only won 3 of those games. And Karl Vamelka was the nightmare one night, and Uka, Pekka, whatever, some guy we'd never heard of in Buffalo coming in, and that ended up being Paul Maurice's final game. But listen, part of the reason why I think we've talked so much about Mark Scheifele this year is because basically if he and his line isn't scoring, this team isn't winning. I mean, you can only rely so much on Pierre-Luc Dubois and Kyle Connor right now, and there's just been not much at all from the bottom 6, and I think that might be one of the stories that maybe those players don't get as much attention, but the lack of contributions on a game-by-game basis outside of the big names has really been something that's put a heck of a lot more pressure on the guys up at the top of the lineup.
Yeah, that's got, it's a great point. And that's got 2 pages for me, inside the book. On the one side is, I think, really right now when it's kind of push comes to shove time here, we're real close to that. I think right now he isn't getting talked about a lot right now because he's just not available. But the Jets are really missing Nick Ehlers here because he's kind of streaky, but he's not one of these guys that just scores for a month straight. But his explosiveness and his availability to be fast and make crazy great plays and score some goals, especially when he starts feeling it, really does take some pressure off some of the offensive players, and certainly does help the second unit on the power play. I mean, that, for a while there, really was hard to distinguish between what was the first unit and the second unit, I would say in the good part of the first half of the season. And that had a lot to do with Nick's contribution. And then the other side of that page is, yes, they're missing Ehlers, and he's a real scoring element for them, and it's kind of what they're missing lately. But now we're also, and I mean, tonight the lineup is different again because Neil Pionk is back in the fold finally, which is great. And it looks like the Jets are done with their COVID list guys. So tonight it'll change. So maybe tomorrow it'll be actually the same again, which would be a real luxury. But haven't we gone here now 6 to 8 weeks where, there's different people out every night and the lineup is different every night? And, we often ask, the Mark Scheifele's and Blake Wheelers of the world and Pierre-Luc Dubois, those guys, your lines are different, your line mates are different. Are you used to it? Can you get used to that? Can you deal with it? Can you still succeed? But sometimes it's a more pertinent question for the third and fourth line guys because they're not counted on to score as much. They don't score as much, but when it's always changing for them, I wouldn't say that they amount to the same level of skill combined as the top 6. I mean, that's just natural with every team in the NHL, but when you're changing it all the time, if your fourth line is different all the time, is it really reasonable to expect guys playing in those roles are going to score much? And I think the answer there is probably not. Is it anyone's fault? Well, probably not. Could those guys do more? Probably they could. But, if you look back to the stretches where the Jets have been a successful team and, an opponent kind of to be feared or to be taken really seriously, I would suggest for a good stretch of last season that was true. And a good stretch of, the marvelous 2017-18 season. That bottom 6 was very stable. It included good combinations of guys who knew each other well. We think back to the Brandon Tanevs of the world. And last year, even just the fourth line, Trevor Lewis, Nate Thompson, steady as she goes, good veterans, smart veteran players. I think the mix is just different, and it's all mixed up all the time here so far. So what's the result? Well, to me, the result is not surprising because of all that uncertainty. So those two factors, today here in the middle of February, while you would say, good teams should be able to overcome them. Well, they should, but maybe that's why the Jets aren't really a good team right now.
Yeah, no, I mean, it is certainly fair. I mean, you mentioned Trevor Lewis. And I mean, we all talked all off season about the changes that were being made, and hey, Vesalainen's ready to go, and Harkins needs a spot to play, and there are all these players that were there, and they moved on from them. And now, I mean, we were noticing Trevor Lewis has more points than Adam Lowry. I'll bet he must be playing less than half the time that Adam Lowry is, and yet he's getting that, those contributions. But the likes of the guys that I think the organization really expected to be more prominent, to basically make the coach have a harder time about, geez, like, do I not give these guys more ice time? We really, for the most part, haven't seen that push right now, Tim. And that gets back to the pressure on guys at the top. But I wanted to ask you this, because I mean, these 3 games coming out of the break, it seemed like the Jets really accepted their spot. I mean, we've dug ourselves a big hole, and we need to, all hands on deck to get out of it. And the game against Minnesota was one of the best of the year. They matched the physicality and the intensity of the Minnesota Wild. It was a very spirited game. And then they built on that going on the road. They scored a late goal to salvage a point in Dallas, which could have been 2. I mean, obviously OT and shootouts can go one way or the other. And then the game in Nashville, down 2-0 after about 10 minutes, getting just shelled, completely flipped the game and dominated for the final 50 minutes and won. And then they come back to play a Chicago team that doesn't have any of the physicality of those teams that we just mentioned. And it was sort of low energy, lackluster game that had a little bit more scoring and sort of playmaking. But it doesn't seem like, despite the way the Jets are built, that plays into their effects. And I guess the question for you is, why do the Jets seem to not dictate anything to anybody? They seem to match, who are we playing? Okay, this is the way we're going to play. At least that's the way I've seen it. And it certainly seemed that way coming out of the All-Star break.
Well, I think that's right. And I think when, we'll assume that here at some point they will, get a rhythm going. I mean, the schedule is starting to dictate a rhythm now. Got to believe we're going to see some kind of good stretch from the team here, and I think that will be the indicator that maybe they're ready to make the climb and to get up, near the line, near the bubble, and make their bid for the spot. I mean, right now they're really kind of off. For my way of thinking, they're off the line. Yeah, there's games in hand here, but there's no guarantee you're winning your games in hand these days, especially when they seem to be able to beat some of the teams ahead of them, but they can't seem to put those points in the bag against teams behind them. And, by those we mean the Buffaloes and the Chicagos of the world, and Arizona, in fact. So, that setting the tone, setting the pace, that will be the sign that, that the team really does have some traction. The other night, I said to our good friend and colleague, Ken Weed, in the press box the other night, I said to him, this game, the way it's going along here through the first period, this is just one of those nights where it's a bit of cat and mouse, and it's going to be, who cracks first. And my mind thought, well, the Jets have had, like you mentioned, the last 3 games have been, pretty helpful in terms of reinforcing in their brains what it is it's going to take on the ice, the style that's needed to win games in the Central Division. Mm-hmm. And I thought, well, they'll have that fresh experience in their minds. They won't do anything dumb, and they'll be the ones that prevail because, they can push the envelope. They probably have a little more skill than Chicago, and they're smart enough with some of the background they have of the past few seasons. They'll just keep pushing until Chicago cracks. And it turned out to be the other way around. They did have a push when they got scored on first, and their third period was a little feistier and a little more pushy, but Marc-Andre Fleury was up to it the other night, and they just couldn't find the goal. A few close chances, but it's a small margin these days in the game. And should it have been an emotional game? Well, I suppose shoulda, woulda, coulda. But, I got the sense this morning after the skate this morning, they've kind of turned the page. They're not going to beat themselves up about, another lost game and another loss. And there was sort of a between the line sense this morning that they maybe learned from Monday night a little bit in terms of what you're talking about, pushing the pace and asserting themselves in the game. But we'll see tonight. Now it's the most important thing ahead of them. They ought to be able to get interested in this game tonight based on how it went against the Wild last week. And we'll see. I would expect something a little feistier and a little more aggressive from the Jets tonight, though.
Well, and I don't think they're going to have a choice, Tim, because
Right.
the Minnesota Wild are coming in. We heard from Jordan Greenway after their win over the Detroit Red Wings a couple nights ago. They were already talking about the trip to Winnipeg tonight. And he basically said that the Winnipeg Jets better be ready because we're coming. They still have a bad taste in their mouth about what happened last week. And I'm here for it because, to be honest, those are the times where we've seen the Jets play their best this year. I mean, they've been incredibly disappointing against some of the lesser teams in the league. But certainly last week indicated that they do have it in them to match up against those teams. And for whatever reason, it brings out the best in them. You just wish that some of that could be bottled, and as well as the points that come from playing teams that are outside of the playoffs. But talk about the Wild, if you would. I mean, this is a team, I'm amazed at how they have turned around in a couple of years because they looked like they were out. They'd sort of missed their window, and they were going nowhere fast. And with the addition of Kaprizov, some of these young players that have come in, a turnover at general manager and at head coach, and I mean, all of a sudden now the Minnesota Wild are a very legitimate contender in the Central and the West.
I think you're right. And, a lot of times a coaching change, it has a very short effect, but in the long term, it never really makes much difference, because the players are the players. I mean, you can't make a given player become someone else. That just really doesn't ever happen in the NHL. But in the Wild's case, I think the coaching change in the bigger, longer term picture has made them a different group. It just seems to be that Dean is the right personality, the right button pusher for this particular group of players. And also they've kind of morphed their team. The last season, if you could ever call an off season, momentous or even catastrophic in some ways in terms of change, you're not going to find many teams that change more than the Wild changed last summer. And it's a credit to what they're doing that they were confident enough to make those changes, discarding, some pretty useful veterans and moving on with a newer, younger group. And, it's been really impressive to me the way they played. The only thing I would say is you would say, well, okay, now they've kind of figured themselves out and they're a contender. But to me, the Wild, it only gets harder for the Wild here. Like they had a big hill to climb with the off-season changes they made, the coaching change they made, a season and a half ago. But just sneak a peek at their cap-friendly page if you get a moment and you want to do some Wild homework and look at what's ahead of them in terms of cap, tie-ups or dead money in the next 3 years. It's, oh my gosh, I'm not sure how Bill Guerin is going to put it together, but they've got some work ahead of them. I'm not saying they should make hay now while they can because they're getting better and getting better, but no team in the NHL, I'll say this with certainty, and me, Huss, I'm not really that great one for predictions, but no team is going to have cap handcuffs on them like the Minnesota Wild are going to have in the next 3 years with, I think it's 12 something next year. And I think it goes up for the following 2 years into the 14s of dead cap money because of the buyouts they executed last year. Like those are cap handcuffs that, have the potential to cost people their jobs and to make fans really disillusioned. Now the base they're building now is going to go a long way to helping them through these rough years. But think about this. Those cap penalties were not brought upon the Wild by accident or happenstance. The Wild knew exactly what they were doing when they bought out Zach Parise and Ryan Suter and what the penalties would be, or the constraints would be in the cap, and they chose to do it anyway. So that tells you what they think about their team and the younger core they have coming up. And they're going to be a fascinating story to watch here in the coming seasons, not just tonight, because it will be a really competitive game tonight, but in the future, it could be almost writing a new chapter for, if you have to, tear down your roster and build it back up, do you need to be afraid of these cap penalties? Or if you draft well enough and trade well enough and sign well enough, these cap penalties and cap constraints maybe aren't the be all and end all that we all thought. I think Bill Guerin is getting to some new ground here. And to me, it's going to be fascinating to see how they get through it, how they navigate it.
Well, there's no doubt about it. And I don't think anyone was maybe surprised that they pulled the trigger on the Parise buyout. It was adding Suter in and doing them. They were both signed at the same time, and they both got bought out at the same time. And I mean, you mentioned what they're staring at in the next few years is going to be an incredible challenge. And maybe that's another reason why you'll see them be very aggressive this year. You mentioned, though, good drafting. We're going to get a chance to see this Matt Boldy. I mean, he had one hell of a game against the Detroit Red Wings, a 2019 first rounder that's just about a point a game so far this year, coming off that big game. There is no substitute for filling the funnel with good, talented young players. And to be honest, in Bill Guerin's situation, he must have a lot of confidence in his scouts, because there's simply no way you compete playing with $14 million cap penalties if you don't have excellent players playing on entry-level deals.
Well, and it applies to every team, even if they aren't aware that it applies to them. And it's literally from the Toronto Maple Leafs and the New York Rangers, the big money teams in the NHL, all the way down to the, Minnesota Wilds and the, Winnipeg Jets and the Edmonton Oilers, the smaller markets, some of the Canadian teams. Like, you cannot survive in the NHL these days for any period of time without strong and decent drafting. You don't have to hit the home run generational player pick every year, but you just have to keep drafting solid, possibilities of players. And that's, it comes from all that homework that scouts do. And it's not just sitting in the stands watching a junior or a college game. It's, making connections and finding out about people and doing that due diligence that comes at the draft combine. And when it comes time before the draft to talk to some of these young players and finding out what makes them tick. Like, all of those things now, to me, have become so much more important. I think the Jets can be quite proud that, I don't want to say they were at the cutting edge of this sort of thing, because it was going on before Winnipeg came back into the NHL 11 years ago, but how the Jets have embraced that and really made that count, and really over time have made a pretty large proportion of solid picks to poor picks, and, gives them a chance to put, a good and what we think is a coming team on the ice. And I think it's one of the things, one of the philosophies you're seeing in Edmonton right now. And, the Oilers are kind of in that middle ground. Some weeks they appear lost, and others they appear on their way. But one of the things the Oilers have going for them here, as time will go on, and I heard Ken Holland say this again very recently, is that, they're not going to give up that first round pick, that they really have grown to understand how important it is to have players, like you said, in that pipeline, because it's what makes your future work. You cannot continue to buy free agents and trade away your top picks and hope to get anywhere, in the medium to long term in the NHL anymore. You just cannot.
It doesn't hurt picking a guy like Kaprizov in the 5th round as well. I was just looking at his numbers. He had that incredible breakout season last year with 27 goals. I mean, Tim, 57 in 43 right now. I mean, they're turning into one of the most elite players in the league. Talent does win games, and has he changed the look of that team? Remember the boring Wild? Not anymore.
Yeah, they're not so boring. They have that little bit of edge, and they do have some skill between Kaprizov and, I'm a big fan of Kevin Fiala's skill, and, love what some of their guys on the back end do, from Jared Spurgeon and Matt Dumba. I mean, look at Mike Hartman or Ryan Hartman having a, unbelievable career
19
season.
goals.
I know, and there's a guy who we always thought was just kind of a grinder, plugger, honest player, but just kind of gets around the ice and adds some energy. He's way more of a dimensional player, than we ever thought. And this is the kind of thing that a good a good team vibe brings out. And we've seen that as recently as 18-19, when some of these Jets characters sort of came into their own with a good team feeling and riding momentum, riding a good fit. Guys like Kyle Connor not coming out of the woodwork, but really kind of asserting themselves in the NHL. I think we're seeing some of that with this Minnesota Wild group.
Tim Campbell of NHL.com with us here on Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily. Jets and Wild drop the puck tonight at 6 p.m. Then Jets are back at it tomorrow, hosting the Seattle Kraken for their first ever time to Canada Life Center. Before we go, Tim, I did want to ask you about the Calgary Flames. A big acquisition of Tyler Toffoli. Their 7th straight win last night. They're 9-1 in their last 10. Thoughts on Calgary and how they've turned it around from that incredibly disappointing season last year where they didn't even make the playoffs in the Canadian division. And for a team like the Winnipeg Jets, which has an interim coach right now, and let's just say things continue going the way they are and they're making a decision on a new bench boss, what can they learn from the turnaround in Calgary this year, how that might help them try to do the same thing next year if this does end up being a disappointing lost season?
I would say 2 things you'd want to write down as things you could use, and one is goaltending. Calgary's gotten that this season in spades. So the Jets have a very capable person in their starting goaltender that certainly has proven he can play at that level. So that should store up your belief that it can make a difference, and it does make a difference. And sometimes it's just that little edge, like we've talked about, a save percentage, of 3 or 4 more saves per 100, even 2 or 3 more saves per 100 shots. We're talking about save percentage all the time. It doesn't take that many more saves to make a difference, and I think Jacob Markstrom is proof of that this season. And the other thing, and this is sort of the highest form of praise for Daryl Sutter, who I think has just been really, really what they needed. He's been the right voice, so a good pick by Brad Treliving there. But it's the simplicity that you get an understanding where it becomes no longer a debate or even a conversation of any kind, that a committed defense will sort of take care of all the rest of the ice. And in increments, you've seen Calgary, to me anyway, you've seen them buy into that, where even their skill players now have come to understand that, in Daryl Sutter's world, and he's the one that controls how much I play, all of my effort's going to be to prevention and responsibility defensively. And, if I can do that, I know he's going to let me do what I want at the other end of the ice. Basically, really, that's Daryl's system. There's certainly a lot more complicated and required X's and O's than that, but the philosophy isn't really much more than that, and it's very simple. So if you're the Jets and you feel a bit lost, those are 2 pretty good starting points. Goaltending can go a long way, and the simplicity of what you need in the game when it really matters. Those 2 things are pushing the Flames. And I'm really bullish on Calgary. I wasn't so much at the beginning of the season. I was in the wait and see camp, and I have liked the Flames for a number of years and been regularly disappointed, almost like I lived in Calgary. But their schedule, if you look at it, to me, is very favorable. They have just a ton of home games ahead of them. And the way that team is playing right now, I think that's going to be a big advantage for for the Flames. So right now, I'm very bullish on Calgary.
Yeah, no, I'm in that same boat as well. I don't think we're going to be getting those 23-1 cup futures that were out there last week the way they're playing right now. That is for sure. Tim, thanks for doing this. And I guess we're going to see Calgary a Monday afternoon game. I guess that's Correct. The Family Day game in Alberta and here in Winnipeg. So both Alberta teams on the weekend with a couple 3:00 starts here when Winnipeg against the Oilers on Saturday. And then, of course, Monday. And just quickly on the way out, Oilers have had a nice little bump from the coaching change from Dave Tippett after those two ugly games coming out of the All-Star break.
They have been pretty good. The Jays, I think, got their mind off of some of the pressures that have gone on. And then the other good thing for Edmonton was they had the one game on the coaching change at home, but now they've been able to get out of town and play on the road this week. And sort of, I think it's been helpful for their focus. So we'll see how that goes carrying forward. They have a home game tomorrow. I believe it might be Anaheim, and then they're here in Winnipeg on Saturday, and then they go right back home and play the Wild on Sunday, and then they go off on the road for a long trip. So a bunch of road time for the Oilers, and I don't, in their case, think that's necessarily a bad thing.
Tim, always a pleasure having you on the program. Thanks so much for doing this. Enjoy the game tonight, and we really appreciate it as always.
Always a pleasure. And Gary said to me that I should compliment you on the fireplace there, but to tell you to turn it down a little because it's kind of hot.
Yeah, you know what? Listen,
dude,
it's going down to minus 35 tonight, so we're gonna keep that sucker jacked, if you know what I'm saying. Okay. Looking forward to turning it down. Hopefully, when Mother Nature provides. Thanks so much, Tim. There he is. Make sure to give him a follow on Twitter at TimNHL, and you can check out all of his work covering the Jets, Flames, Oilers, and more at NHL.com. A great conversation. Listen, Jets Wild is the starter, but I would say for many people coast to coast, the main course tonight is served up just after 10 p.m. with Canada and the United States for gold in Beijing in women's hockey. We'll get to that in just a second. And we'll maybe crack a couple Little Brown Jugs for the game, maybe even a couple for the Jet game as well tonight. Of course, Little Brown Jug, Winnipeg's favorite local beer, available at the brewery and tap room, and a great spot to go to meet friends down on William Avenue. You can grab the iconic 1919, the Brute IPA, the very popular Double, a great winter beer, or heck, you can pick up the winter variety pack and try 4 of Winnipeg or Little Brown Jug's favorite beers for the colder season. And if you do want to get it delivered to your own place, they deliver Wednesday, Friday, and Saturday citywide. Just simply go into littlebrownjug.ca, make your order, and they'll get it delivered out to you. And by the way, good news for you folkies. I know Remis was all fired up about this. Little Brown Jug just signed a deal. They will be available throughout Winnipeg Folk Festival when it is back in full effect this summer. Fingers crossed. Our friends at Boston Pizza are ready for tonight. I have a feeling we might actually head out after the game, just down to see Crystal and the gang over at Boston Pizza City Place and saddle up some other great NHL games. And then, of course, 10 o'clock tonight, Canada and the United States for gold. But if you're staying at home, you can get those amazing Boston's wings. Check the Wing Lovers game day deal, by the way. It's great if you got a couple people that love wings, gourmet pizzas, and more. Go online to bostonpizza.com. Make your order and get it hot and fresh to your door. All right, before we get to Sean Fitz-Gerald and our Olympic report, he's got a great piece in The Athletic on the history of the rivalry between Canada and the United States in women's hockey, and talk a little bit more about tonight's game. Let's get to the Princess Auto curling report. Again, folks, if you're a big curling fan, we had Reed Carruthers on the show yesterday talking about Team McEwen's big win in the Viterra, some thoughts on the Olympics as well. Man, for those of us that got up early, what a disappointing game for the Queen, Jennifer Jones. A real tough loss. Seemingly starting poorly, having a big 5-ender in full complete control, and then losing in an extra end. Giving up a steal in the extra end to the Chinese. So where this ends up is they need to win. They need to beat Denmark tonight, and then they potentially need a little help. I mean, I've got a list here, and essentially of the Canadian options more than half of them, if they beat Denmark, will win. But there are 3 other games. Every one of them has significance on the playoffs. It would take us about 30 minutes to break it all down. Bottom line is Jen and her team need to win and maybe need a little bit of help to get to the playoffs. But once getting to the playoffs, Jennifer Jones capable of anything. But a tough day so far for Canada. They're sleeping it off right now, and they'll get back at it tomorrow morning in Beijing, which is this evening here in Canada. And the good news for Brad Gushue, he and his teammates had the day off, and they're in the playoffs. They woke up ready to go because with the results in some other games, Gushue will be in the playoffs, 1 game away from playing for a medal. So, of course, Princess Auto, proud sponsors of Jennifer Jones and proud sponsors of Team McEwen on their way to the Brier representing Manitoba. And the spot for the best deals and the most unique assortment of tools and equipment around, and everything you need to complete the projects on your list or start something new is at Princess Auto. Visit them at either of their 2 Winnipeg locations, or get thinking, shopping, and dreaming online 24/7, 365 at princessauto.com. All right, tonight it's on. Canada, USA, gold medal game. Well, let's catch up with Sean Fitz-Gerald of the National Post for more on the rivalry between these
Athletic.
2 teams. Formerly of the National Post, now with the Athletic. We caught up with him a little bit earlier. Let's talk about it here on Winnipeg Sports Talk. Sean, what's going on? How are you?
I'm doing well. Trying to figure out what time zone I'm in. I'm trying to figure out what time I'm going to bed, what time I'm not going to bed. I have no idea what month it is at this point. How are you doing?
It is, it's been challenging for a lot of people following the events, and I can only imagine for someone like you that's covering the Olympics throughout the body clock has been screwed up a little bit. And, and the funny thing is, credit to the organizers for planning the gold medal game at, I guess, noon in Beijing, so you can get as many folks watching it here because this is one of the preeminent events, and it's a game that we all knew we were going to be seeing, but the excitement continues to grow. Listen, before we get to tonight's matchup, Sean, you did a great job of going down in your piece. This rivalry, when you think of great sports rivalries, certainly as a Canadian, this is right up at the top of the list. It's gone back and forth. It's incredibly competitive. They're way better than everybody else. When it comes to women's hockey, this is a Stanley Cup final, 7-game series, all built into 1 game.
Yeah, talking to Becky Keller, retired Canadian Olympic defenseman, she compared it a little bit to Canada, Soviet Union in 1972. Back when, in 1998, when women's hockey first made its debut at the Olympics, the World Championships at that point was only 8 years old. They met for their first IHF sanctioned World Championship in 1990. The kids weren't going to school together. A lot of Canadians weren't going to the NCAA. Americans weren't coming up to Canada to play university, so they didn't know each other. In those early days of the rivalry, Cassie Campbell-Pascal has great stories of, when they're at tournaments and you're a Canadian and you're staying in the same hotel as an American, you weren't allowed to get on the same elevator with an American player. You weren't supposed to talk to them. If you were friendly by chance with any of them, you weren't supposed to talk to each other. They had a visceral dislike of each other, and that manifested itself in a bunch of different ways. I think, arguably reaching its apex in 2002 in Salt Lake City, when Hayley Wickenheiser comes storming off the ice and tells what was essentially a made-up story that never happened about, allegedly the Americans had the Maple Leaf on their floor, and her legendary line to Don Cherry was, we heard the Americans had our flag on their floor in the dressing room, and now I want to know if they want us to sign it. That's visceral hatred. That's obviously evolved and it's changed over the years, and that doesn't take away anything from what they are on the ice. They can be building towards things off the ice. They've won NCAA championships together. They're trying to build a sustainable, powerful women's hockey league where kids can go and play professionally. But on the ice, they still want to beat the hell out of each other.
You mentioned, that Hayley Wickenheiser interview. That's a WWE promo. Vince McMahon probably was like, sign this woman, and no, she's the best hockey player in the world.
So I developed a fascination with that. I can still remember, I was working at National Post at the time. I remember being in the newsroom watching that game on the television. And then, seeing Haley go off, Terry Leibel, CBC reporter, Don Cherry, off the ice. Apparently, she wasn't necessarily invited on. Like usually they have a media relations person saying, hey, can you come on? Apparently, the story is that, she saw the camera and she was steaming, obviously, because what had happened was in second intermission, Cassie Campbell Pascal had this story sort of in her back pocket. I think it was something that was passed on from an equipment manager, from somebody who knew somebody somewhere in the rink. It turned out it was never true. And she had this story saying, okay, it's still really close. We got to put the pedal down here. So I'm going to use this story that I've heard second, third hand. And I think it probably had the desired effect. And that gets back to what we're talking about earlier, that in 2002, a lot of these folks didn't know each other. Like Canadians and Americans, weren't going to school together as much as they are now. Whereas, if that happened today in 2022, somebody could probably just shoot a text to their former college roommate saying, do you have our flag on your floor? No, I didn't think so. Back then, not only there weren't cell phones, maybe they could send a pager message to each other, but so that allowed that to happen. So she comes off the ice, she tells the story, and, Cassie Campbell Pascal has to spend the next several days basically quelling an international incident with USA Hockey and then the Canadian Hockey Association joining an investigation, and, politicians were involved on both sides of the border. It turned into a real thing. And that was all because they hated each other so much that the Canadians could believe that story to be plausible, that the Americans actually had the Maple Leaf on their floor. That's how much they disliked each other.
Sean Fitz-Gerald of The Athletic with us, getting ready for Canada, USA for Olympic gold tonight, just after 10 p.m. here in Winnipeg in the Central Time Zone. The history of the rivalry is incredible because, they have been so close. It's been going back and forth, but at the biggest events, Canada has really owned the Olympics right up until Pyeongchang in 2018. And I know they feel that they've got to take that thing back. And in the World Championships, though, over the course of the past decade, particularly, there's been far more success for Team USA. I'm not sure how that leads into tonight's game, but the bottom line is both teams know that they can win. Both teams have won before. But when it comes to the biggest stage, the Olympics, that has been Canada's domain, with the exception of the last time out. And of course, the U.S. are going to try to defend their gold tonight.
Well, a big part of it was, the post in Sochi, preventing the empty net goal late in the game. And then it was by the divine intervention of Marie-Philippe Poulin, right? She scored 2 goals to help Canada win in 2010. She scored another couple of major goals in 2014. Otherwise, Canada might be on the losing end of a 3 Olympic losing streak right here, if not for the hand of God, otherwise known as Marie-Philippe Poulin. Because, the Americans, they were playing catch-up in the early years, and that's what made 1998 such a surprise, that the U.S. did win, right? Canada hadn't lost, I don't think, in a World Championships final to the U.S. Heading into those Olympic Games, and then they go and they lose. And that's what made 2002 such a grudge match. And then in 2006, the Canadians were warming up for their semifinal game, and all of a sudden they're watching the U.S. in a surprisingly tight game against Sweden. And then it goes to the shootout. And then the U.S. loses in a shootout, and all the Canadian players, and I've spoken with a few, including Cheryl Pounder and Vicky Sonahara, who are sitting there watching, just sort of their jaws on the floor saying, holy bleep. They couldn't believe it. And that kind of snapped them to attention to make sure that, they won their semi and they went on to win gold. And then, you have 2010, great game, Marie-Philippe Poulin, images of the Canadians on the ice in Vancouver with their cigars and their champagne and their beers, posing for pictures. And then 2014, which I would argue, goes right up against 2002 in terms of the greatest match ever played between these two countries. And then 2018, which again, exceptional skill leads the U.S. to a win. It really is a different narrative every time they meet.
Now, in the background of all of this is, where women's hockey is, worldwide as a sport, as an Olympic sport. And I know there's been some terrible takes that, that maybe the women's hockey game doesn't belong in the Olympics because there's 2 teams that are so much better than everyone else. Listen, I'd sign up for a 7-game series between these 2 teams, and I think most people would. But for women's hockey, and you sort of touched on this earlier, at the start, they were adversaries. But many of these women playing in this game tonight are the leaders of the next generation in a sport that is looking to take a big step forward around the world, not just in North America. But when it comes to North America, I mean, we're all going to be tuned in to watch this game tonight. And then for most people, Sean, this game's going to end and we won't be talking or watching women's hockey for a long time. I mean, how important is this stage, this spectacle, and this rivalry in bringing the women's game to that next level and allowing these incredible athletes to earn a living and continue to grow the game as professionals?
Yeah, I mean, the growing the game as professionals part, I think that'll be answered in the months after whatever happens tonight. I would hope that there are plans in place because, yes, the fact that there isn't a single professional viable league for everybody to play in is, I don't want to use bad words here, but yeah, I mean, they deserve a place to play. There is a market for elite women's hockey. I mean, I just bought my first sports tickets in 2.5 years. And this weekend, I'm going to take the kids and we're going to go down to Ryerson University to watch the Ryerson women, my alma mater, hopefully beat up on Queens. And it's going to be great hockey because it's great high-level hockey. And that's the point of, you take a look at the game and you take a look at the evolution. Like these countries, like Finland's a good hockey team. They just won the bronze medal playing good hockey. There are teams that gave the U.S. more of a run for their money than they anticipated. The field is closing. The field is improving. The challenge there is that Canada and the U.S. have just taken off on rocket fuel because they have the built-in mechanism of the NCAA and elite development and centralization and heavy investment in North America. And that's forcing slowly, far more slowly apparently than some critics would like, the rest of the world to catch up. Like if you want to use the argument of, there's only 2 teams that are competitive, well, do yourself a favor and maybe don't watch luge or bobsled or any of the sliding sports, and definitely don't watch a lot of the downhill stuff because, your eyes might be burned by the fact that only a couple of countries are really, truly competitive in that. No, this is about growth. This is about equality, parity, accessibility, inclusivity. That's what this is about. And that's about growing the game. And that's what we're seeing here.
Well, and the one thing that I will say is that, because we've seen, and I was involved with Hockey Canada and putting on the World Women's Hockey Championships here in Winnipeg 15 years ago in Winnipeg, which was an incredibly well-supported event and something that people still talk about here, and it was a legacy event that's grown girls hockey at a grassroots level. And we've got 3 Manitobans on this team right now, which, population-wise, I think bodes very well. But watching this tournament this year, having watched a lot of, women's hockey over the past 20 years, the one thing that stood out to me, Sean, is that while the other countries are continuing to improve and move forward, it seems like the competition between Canada and the United States have pushed each other so much that they might actually be taking their game to a next level at an even greater rate, if that makes any sense. And we've seen some real drubbings of teams that had actually closed the gap and had far closer games in previous tournaments, not this time in Beijing.
Make no mistake about it. The registration rate for girls and young women in Canada is what's keeping Canadian registration numbers afloat.
100%.
If that rate hadn't increased, we'd have a national inquisition about why hockey's fallen off the map and it's already en route to becoming Canadian polo, right? The girls are the ones that are holding us above water. And when you get numbers like that, you get development like that, you get skill development like that. There's 6-year-old girls who are learning inside, outside, edge work. They're learning forward, backward crossovers. The skill development, again, it's just incredible to see. And that is a very good thing. Let's absolutely be clear about that. And anybody who says, well, they're developing too fast or they're developing, well, no, that's a false argument, and I won't accept that at all. They're pushing each other. That's what competition's supposed to do. And as viewers, we get to reap the rewards of that on nights like tonight, frankly.
Well, and, let's talk about tonight's game because, maybe first, Marie-Philippe Poulin.
Good, because I was about to go off on a rant there. I didn't want to swear to you.
Hayley Wickenheiser, one of the most incredible Canadian athletes of all time. Never mind hockey players. What she's done during her playing career, what she's done afterwards, doctor, now working in the National Hockey League. It really is incredible. But where does Marie-Philippe Poulin rank now? When we're talking about the greatest Canadian women's hockey players of all time, where is she at right now? And what if she does another Marie-Philippe Poulin performance tonight? Might we be talking about her as the best ever?
I think that's entirely possible. And it's also important to know that, like, the players on the team today, I mean, they're in a video game, right? They're part of EA Sports NHL, which is obviously the most popular video game for hockey in the world. It introduces generations of fans to the game. They're in Tim Hortons playing cards. We have a 7-year-old just down the hall who, is holding on to a Marie-Philippe Poulin Tim Hortons card with grim death grip. Her older brothers offered I believe there was a Sidney Crosby and maybe a Brad Marchand on the table, and she's still not budging. These things are all advancements that were helped upon, standing on the shoulders of the generation that came before them, the Cassie Campbells, the Cheryl Pounders, the Jana Heffords, the Haley Wickenheisers, the Sammy Jo Smalls, the Shannon Zabados, the Kim St. Pierre's, and then, the Vicky Sonoharas, and then, all the way back to the Angela Jameses and even before the Fran Riders. Each one has, to mix my metaphors, pushed the ball further down the field, right? Haley Wickenheiser, scored that touchdown. She was, obviously a huge star in her time, albeit, playing next to other huge stars, just as Marie-Philippe Poulin is flanked by huge stars. Melody Daou, Natalie Spooner, incredible players. But yeah, she transcends the game because she is Captain Clutch. She's renowned as Captain Clutch on her own team. And if she goes and does a Marie-Philippe Poulin thing again tonight, the question is just how big is the statue that people build for her outside the Hockey Hall of Fame? Because it's going to be a goddamn big one.
It's hilarious that you bring that up because, I think it was in the series that they played getting ready for the Olympics where Coolbet, the betting site that we work with, was putting out odds. And Marie-Philippe Poulin had scored the OT winner in a game, and they listed it. And this is sort of one of those bets that almost seems like a bit of a sucker bet. And it was like 9 or 10 to 1. Will Marie-Philippe Poulin score the OT winner in the game tonight? And, it was like 10 to 1. And it cashed. He did it again. And lo and behold, it got listed at 19 to 1 earlier today. I guarantee you by game time tonight, that'll be down to about 12 because so many people will be jumping on it. But she'll be centered. She'll be, at the front of that top line, along with Sarah Nurse, who's had just an unbelievable up tournament, leading the tournament and scoring, along with Brianne Jenner. But there is a new generation of young Canadian women that have announced their arrival. They're familiar with the 8 goals at the top of the list. We are seeing a little bit of a changing of the guard. I think that's another thing for both teams, actually, why we've seen this, high power, especially on Team Canada with their dominating performance so far in this event.
Well, I think you look at 2018, and you mentioned this earlier about the World Championships and how sort of the tide had turned against Canada, right? I think they lost something like 8 of 10 World Championships. You're like, ooh. And then you start wondering, does this feed into the narrative of, Canada isn't developing players at the rate that they should, right? It's just pure mathematics that, obviously the U.S. has 10 times the number of people that if they really started investing in hockey, Canada's in trouble no matter what it does. But raising the question of development, are Canadian minor hockey administrators using all of the tools at their disposal to properly develop kids? You look at, the U.S. had moved to modified ice, which is, kids playing to ice sizes, the size that they are, that you don't have 7-year-olds playing on 200 feet of ice anymore. The U.S. adopted that as a mandate before Canada did. The U.S. has adopted a bunch of other things before Canada has. It's more closely aligned, I think, with things ongoing in Finland and Sweden, developments to focus on development rather than performance. Whereas I think in Canada, we still, even at kids level, focus on results rather than developing. So in 2018, you start to look at the way that unfolded in light of the broader context of the World Championship trend. You're like, has the U.S. caught and now passed us? And are now we going to be playing catch up for the rest of eternity? Well, you take a look at the tournament this month, and, even expert pundits, I'm just a casual amateur, are saying that, Canada's depth is remarkable in relation to the U.S. So this really does offer the chance to flip the script once again in the greatest rivalry in North American sports.
Well, and one other kind of side story to that is that, all these young Canadian girls are playing hockey. And what are they trying to do? Well, obviously they want to play for Canada internationally, but they want to get a big U.S. scholarship and go play down in the States. And you wonder both from a professional side of things, North America wide, but, at what point will those sort of opportunities for maybe the players that are just a cusp below the national team program have to stay here in Canada? Because otherwise, Sean, I mean, pretty much every one of them is going south of the border.
Yeah, I mean, we have my 7-year-old daughter is convinced she's going to the Olympics. And if she stays on track, that means 2034 games. She'll be the all-time penalty minutes leader for Team Canada in the 2034 games. So, the question is, on top of the NCAA and on top of the opportunities in, U sports, Canadian university sports, what is the opportunity going to look like for kids who are 7 to 10 or 12 now in terms of making this a career, in terms of being able to play professional hockey and not have to take extra, shifts at the local big box store so that they can pay their rent? Like a meaningful way where, we can watch this elite level hockey and watch it on TV and go down to the local arena and watch it and pay to watch it there, because that is going to ultimately be the end game here.
Sean, thanks so much. Cannot wait for the game tonight. Really enjoy your piece in The Athletic on this great rivalry. Enjoy the game tonight. There'll be some kids. It'll be maybe a little late for school tomorrow, but it'll be for a very good reason. You enjoy, and thanks for doing this.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
All right. Big thanks to Sean Fitz-Gerald for popping by the program. Great chat. Definite must-read article in The Athletic on the history of this incredible rivalry between Canada and the USA. And tonight, 10:10 p.m. after Jets Wild, one game for all the marbles, gold medal on the line in Beijing 2022, Canada versus the USA. All right, we are going to talk a little more Olympics with our good friend Mitch Peacock in just a second. We want to give a big thanks to our friends Nick and Nikki over at the Nick and Nikki DQ group for their wonderful support of Winnipeg Sports Talk since day one. They're pretty fired up right now because DK has completely revamped their burger menu. And to be honest, I already thought they were amazing. But there's 8 brand new stack burgers, new flavorful patties, new sauces, new buns, absolutely incredible burgers that are they now completely set DQ apart from their competition in the fast food burger game. The other thing that's hot right now at DQ, well, not physically hot, but you know what I'm saying, is the Red Velvet Blizzard featuring cream cheese icing, red velvet cake pieces, all blended together. Absolutely delicious. Why don't you pop down and try one? Nick and Nikki DQ, DQ Niverville, DQ Northgate, DQ Polo Park, and DQ St. Anne's. And I think for you folks in St. Vital, you can order from the St. Anne's on Skip the Dishes and on Uber Eats. And
I got to chime in here. These burgers, I'm showing them on screen. My mouth is watering looking at these.
Okay, you know what? Just do a quick rundown of these.
Okay, bacon 2 cheese deluxe
stack burger,
flamethrower. I'm like, ooh, I can't even get my words out. I got so much saliva.
The loaded steak burger, the loaded steakhouse burgers looks so good. They debuted that one last month.
This is the best part of the website. So this is the double, but I can hit triple, and now there's 3.
Ooh. I'm going with the double. I think the triple might be too much meat.
Probably, but I just like hitting it and how it grows. Sorry to interrupt your read here.
You know what? They won't mind. It just goes to show that this is the real deal, and we're legitimately excited to get in. I think Nick's back next week, and we'll head down there and try a few of those. But again, Nick and Nikki, great supporters of ours. I'll pop down and see them at any of the 4 Nick and Nikki DQ locations. Speaking of great supporters of ours, a huge thanks to the folks at Canadian Club. And I know Canadian Club is a very popular drink for folks here in Manitoba. Of course, it is the OG since 1848. And right now, you can get a great deal on Canadian Club. I know you all like good deals at your local Manitoba liquor marts all month of February. Check out for the Canadian Club display. Original Canadian Club 100% rye, and Canadian Club 12-year reserve is all on sale. So pick it up for a great price at your local Manitoba liquor mart. And don't forget to join us on Friday afternoon. We've got another co-branded Winnipeg Sports Talk Canadian Club hoodie to give away in our week-ending marble race here on Winnipeg Sports Talk. All right, you heard me mention that Marie-Philippe Poulin overtime bet. We will get to the Coolbet Lines in just a couple minutes. We'll focus in on that game as well as the Jets Wild and more. Before that, got a chance to catch up with Mitch Peacock before he finally hit the hay after calling an incredible night of speed skating. And while it sucked last night for the hockey team and it was not good for Jen Jones and the Curlers, Charles Hamlin made history on the short track. So we'll talk a little bit about that, as well as what's it like to broadcast the Olympic Games remotely. Here's our conversation with Mitch Peacock. Unfortunately, though, Mitch, this time not overseas. First of all, thanks for doing this. How are you? And what's the experience like moving back and forth in Toronto to call things happening, on the other side of the world, on the other side of the clock, if you will?
Yeah, well, firstly, my pleasure. Thanks for having me. Always great to talk with you. I love the program. Love what you guys are doing, and
thanks, Mitch.
I really think you're on the cutting edge of things. It's really interesting and a sign of the times. Technology is such and budgets are such that a lot of things are being done remotely. And so that's what's happening with CBC's coverage of these Olympic Games. The vast majority of it is done remotely. And so we live on China time, living in Canada's Eastern time zone. And it's meant a lot of early wake up calls, 3 o'clock, 3:30 in the morning. Getting ready, going through the notes, getting over to the CBC headquarters here, and climbing into one of those booths that are rigged up to call the events, and off we go. And we do the best we can to replicate what it's like to be there. And in fairness, the technology and the technicians are amazing, and so it's as good as it could possibly be for not being there.
How short track speed skating is such an exciting, fast sport where things can happen very quickly. I mean, just from a broadcasting standpoint, how much more challenging is it doing it remotely on a screen as opposed to being there in the venue, feeling the crowd, and looking over the athletes?
Yeah, it's interesting, Huss. There's kind of a couple of layers to that, I would say. The vast majority of the event calling that we've done has been live. And when it's live to air, then we use the larger monitor that's in our booths. We have 2 monitors in each booth. And so the larger monitor, when we're live across the country, is a lot easier to read, a lot easier to keep track of who's who and recognize numbers on helmets and things like that. When we do things that are taped, we do them off of a smaller screen, and that's when things can get hard, especially when skaters on the other side of the ice, or something's just not right in your view, or in a relay where there's a bundle of skaters on the ice, then it can get a little bit tricky. And the energy is different, right? You're not there in and amongst a crowd. In Pyeongchang, when we were calling short track speed skating, that's one of the biggest sports in Korea. And the place was packed and the joint was jumping, and, there's a whole different energy to that experience. So you do the best you can with the way that it is. And I think it works out all right. We had some fun today for sure.
Well, okay, listen, I want to talk about Charles Hamlin and the rest of the Canadians that are making us proud over on the short track, but I have to ask you about Canada-Sweden today in men's hockey. And I know you're focusing on this short track, but I'm sure you saw some of the game.
Yeah.
Like, to expect people to call Team Canada wearing those jerseys remotely, I can't think of a more difficult assignment. And, congratulations to Chris and the guys. They did an unbelievable job. But there should be some sort of protest from the broadcasters to Hockey Canada and some of these uniform makers, knowing what the situation is, because that red on black was literally almost impossible to make out players. And that's if you've got great eyesight watching on a massive television. I can't imagine what it's like to be the guy that's job is to identify everybody in the middle of everything that's going on.
Well, if anybody can do it, Chris Cuthbert can, right? We know that.
Best in the biz.
But I'm telling you what, that is stretching it to the limit for sure. At least they could have put a white outline around those numbers or something along those lines to try and bring them out a little bit. They clearly didn't run them by anybody who's ever called a game before, because that was really, really difficult. Now, I guess experienced play-by-play guys would tell you that in a very short time covering a team, you get pretty good at who's right-handed, who's left-handed, what their skating posture is, what position they play, all that kind of stuff. So you can do okay at figuring out who's who, even if you're in a situation where you can't see the numbers. But it's a lot nicer when you can see the numbers. It takes the guesswork out of it.
Well, I got up early today, not early enough apparently, because I managed to see Canada get skunked by Sweden and a really unfortunate end to the women's curling game with Jen Jones. And you did remind me that it wasn't all doom and gloom. Canada had an amazing performance. I guess what was it, the 5,000 meter men's relay? Canada wins the gold, but the big story of this was Charles Hamlin back on top and record setting it, doing it in his style with a gold medal and being up there in a pretty unique stratosphere with Manitoba's and Winnipeg's Cindy Klassen, one of the all-time greatest Olympians in Canadian history.
Yeah, you're doing things right when you're in the same neighborhood as Cindy Klassen, that's for sure. And Charles Hamlin today, as part of that men's relay, they did something really remarkable. It was his fifth Olympic Games, his final Olympic Games, 37 years of age, one event left. One last chance to make a mark with a very close-knit team, a group of guys that are really passionate, excited about trying to have success as a team, working for one another. Let's remember, too, that Stephen Dubois came into it with a couple of medals already. He had a silver and a bronze, and they were ready to try and make this thing happen. They had the best point total in the World Cup in the season that was held prior to the turn of the year. They had a confidence coming in from a very good semifinal performance, and they were able to execute. And it was interesting because after Stephen Dubois won his bronze medal in the 500 on the weekend, he did an interview with our Rosie Fillion at the side of the rink, and she asked him about the possibility of success in the relay. And he said, we have a saying in French, jamais deux sans trois. He said, roughly translates to, whenever there's two, there's got to be three. And in English, you might say things happen in threes, right? And so he made that remark, and he kind of gave her a wink. And at the same time, you knew that there was a fire there. They were excited about this possibility. And sure enough, they produced today Hamlin right in the thick of it with Pascal Dion, with Jordan Pierre-Gilles, and with Stephen Dubois. And Dubois is, sort of the understated hero of this whole thing. He's not going to get talked about all that much, but he comes away with 3 medals from these games, a gold, a silver, and a bronze. And he's the guy I think you're going to hear more and more about going forward from this. Hamlin will retire after the World Championship in his hometown of Montreal next month.
What a moment that will be. And, coming back an Olympic champion, the most decorated male Winter Olympian ever. And I guess he also was sharing some history with Andre DeGrasse too, Mitch.
Yeah, it's interesting. So he ties Cindy Klassen for most medals for a Canadian Winter Olympian. He ties Andre DeGrasse for most medals for an Olympian in terms of males in Canada. And then in terms of gold medals, he's also got himself a tie for a record. He's tied with Haley Wickenheiser, Carolyn Ouellette, and Jana Hefford for most gold medals by a Canadian athlete. That's now 4 for him, and he joins those incredibly talented women on that mark. So what a way to go out. I mean, anybody, could have drawn this up any better. I challenge them to think of a way, because you go out with a gold medal, you tie all of those records, and it was one of those things where, what short track's like, right? I mean, it's roller derby on ice. It can go the wrong way in a hurry, and whatever you work for goes out the window in the blink of an eye. But these guys just executed to perfection. They got themselves into a good spot over the 45 laps, and Stephen Dubois took it home to secure the gold medal. So fairy tale. That's the best way to describe it for Charles Hamlin. And the Canadians put a nice little exclamation mark on their work at the games, with 4 of the Canadian 18 medals coming from short track.
Well, and we've been talking a lot about the women's sports and a huge women's gold medal game tonight, but we should mention Kim Boutin, who got onto the podium as well as a Canadian short tracker.
Yeah, she sure did. Kim Boutin with the bronze medal in the 500. When she won that bronze medal in the 500 last week, that meant that she'd been in 4 individual events in the Olympic Games and won a medal in each and every one of them, which is quite remarkable. And I think maybe also worth talking about when you talk about Kim Boutin is, you might remember that she was cyberbullied in Pyeongchang 4 years ago after a penalty to a Korean skater moved Boutin into a medal position. And she went through a lot to try and get over that. She had threats on her life that really made her feel uncomfortable. It took her years to work through that, to feel better about what happened in Pyeongchang, think about the 3 medals that she had won instead of thinking about all of the fear that the experience brought her. And so she now, I think, is a real beacon for mental health, for taking time to get to know your feelings and to work through these things. And she ended up having great success in these games, and part of it built on that foundation, those mental skills that she's got.
Well, and you know what? I'm glad you brought that up because, I think most people saw that, emotional tweet yesterday from Rachel Holman, and what she is dealing with. And she's in a unique position because, curling is such a huge sport in Canada. She is so well known. And with that comes a lot of pressure. But for athletes like him, I mean, you could kind of leave an event 4 years ago out of the spotlight and are dealing with that. It can be incredibly difficult for a lot of these people, and certainly 4 years later to have her be a part of a medal-winning performance, a great way for her to turn that story around. And overall, though, for Canada on the short track, very successful, certainly as opposed to what the expectations were, Mitch.
I think probably in line with expectations. I think they're pretty happy that they were able to come away with 4 medals, a gold, a silver, and 2 bronze. One short of the total that they had in Pyeongchang. But, as I said, it's a volatile sport. And even if you've had a great track record, even if things are going well, you can get a bad break. Kim Boutin's a good example of that. After winning the bronze medal in the 500, she was flying in her heat in the 1000. She looked like she was easily going to qualify to move on in the competition. She had a little bit of a slip near the finish line. The next thing you know, she's out of it altogether. So you can set your targets, but executing and making it happen in the spotlight's another thing. And so I think in general, Speed Skating Canada will be very pleased with what's happened long track and short track as they've come through with these 4 medals.
Mitch Peacock is the voice of the short track events at the 2022 Beijing Olympics and joining us at Winnipeg Sports Talk. Mitch, thanks so much for taking the time. I know you're probably due for some rest, maybe checking in on a few of the other events. Check out that hockey game tonight, don't forget. And let's get together when you're back here for a full recap and maybe to talk about a few other things in addition to what's happening on the international Olympic scene.
That would be great. Thanks for having me. Really enjoyed it, and keep up the good work, guys.
All right, thanks to Mitch Peacock, and kudos to him for the great job covering short track speed skating at the Olympics. Looking forward to getting Mitch back on when he gets back to the peg in the coming weeks. All right, before we go, let's get to the Coolbet odds tonight. Don't forget, if you've never bet a Coolbet, use the promo code WST. It will give you a 100% bonus on your first deposit up to $200. The game of the night outside of the National Hockey League. Well, damn, the game of the night is Canada and the USA playing for a gold medal. Canada, this is to win in regulation. Canada is minus 143. That's actually come down quite a bit. The U.S. women opened at, I think it was plus 310 or 305, which didn't make a lot of sense because of how close these teams are. U.S. had 50 shots in the original game, but it was Canada that stood tall. The draw in reg is plus 350. That's what I'm on. But what is interesting, we mentioned that there was that Marie-Philippe Poulin prop. If you hit player goals there, Remis, you'll see there's one. Marie-Philippe Poulin to score overtime goal, which essentially is a draw parlayed with the Poulin to get the winner. But she always seems to do it. So it opened at 19-1. Obviously, a bunch of people have hit it. It's 17-1 right now. So if you would like to get in on that, it's all there at Coolbet. Total for the game is 4.5 in regulation only, under 4.5 plus 116. Moving on over to the National Hockey League. Jets and Wild kick things off. Jets, a home underdog, plus 126. The Wild, minus 149 on money line. Pretty much a straight pick 'em between the Panthers and the Hurricanes. We've got some great games tonight, actually. I mean, only 4 games. Hopefully the Jets can bring it and have a great one with the Minnesota Wild. You know you should get a good one between the Panthers and the Hurricanes. Minus 109, minus 108, essentially a pick 'em. Anaheim is in Calgary. Man, did the Flames look good last night, pumping the Columbus Blue Jackets. Anaheim plus 190, Calgary a heavy minus 227. Favorite at home, looking to win 8 in a row. And the finale is the Avalanche, minus 137 in Vegas to take on the Knights. The Avs upset last night at home, courtesy of the Dallas Stars. That was not good for Winnipeg Jets playoff hopes. And the Vegas Golden Knights, plus 117. And Remo, I guess this is Jack Eichel's debut. Been a long time we've seen the sideshow Bob of the National Hockey League with that lid out on the ice, and it'll be the first time ever people get to see him in the gold of the VGK.
Yeah, I was putting in my fantasy lineups. I had Jack Eichel, and I did get a nice look at that head of hair. It's quite a mane. But yeah, plus 170 score. He'll be on the top line with Dadonov and Pacioretty. So I'm looking forward to seeing Jack Eichel, of course. Mark Stone on LTIR to make room on the cap. I saw people joking on Twitter that Stone's still suffering aftershocks from the hit from Dustin Byfuglien while he was with the Senators. But he's got, some back issue or something that, I'm sure conveniently he'll be ready in time for the playoffs. And that's a story to watch as we go on. But yeah, that's a big game tonight. I'll probably have that game on and the Canada-USA game on at the same time.
They do have updated cup odds right now. And I know I mentioned last week on the Lock Shop and on Mead Streets with Chris Meany that I thought there was great value on the Calgary Flames at 23-1. Well, all they've done is kept winning since then, and we knew that number was going to drop. Calgary now down to 17-1. Avalanche still the favorite at plus 425. Tampa and Florida and Vegas all at 8-1. Leafs 9-1. Hurricanes 12. And then Pittsburgh 16, Minnesota 17, as well as Calgary. You got to go a ways down. We haven't seen a number like this on the Winnipeg Jets in a long, long time. It was 50 a week and a couple of weeks ago. Reality setting in right now, and it's certainly setting in at the books. If you think that a miracle is around the corner, you can get 70-1 on the Winnipeg Jets right now. But as we mentioned, with a 10% chance by the numbers of making the playoffs, you might want to sit that one out. Bottom line is, should be a good one tonight. I can't wait to see hopefully a pretty full building and a great atmosphere for what should be a pretty fiery hockey game between two teams that don't like each other and still have some bad blood remaining from last week's game here in Winnipeg. Don't forget, it's a 6:00 puck drop, and we'll talk about it all tomorrow, as well as get ready for the first ever visit of the Seattle Kraken, because it's back-to-back games tonight and tomorrow for the Winnipeg Jets at Canada Life Center. Big thanks to all of our guests. It was great to talk to Mitch Peacock and Sean Fitz-Gerald about the Olympics. Of course, Tim Campbell, a great guest on the National Hockey League. And if you tuned in late, make sure to get to the start of the show. Our first guest today was new Blue Bomber receiver Greg Ellingson, who was a heck of a lot of fun to have on the program. He was awesome. Thanks to all of our sponsors: Not Autocorp, Royal Sports, Manitoba Battery, Princess Auto, Little Brown Jug, Boston Pizza, F Apparel, Vita Health, Culligan Water, and of course the Nick and Nicky DQ Group, Canadian Club Whiskey, and Coolbet Canada. Folks, get a little pregame nap in, because starting at 6:00, we got a long night ahead of us. Jets, Wild, Canada, USA. We'll break it down all for you tomorrow on Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily. Thanks for being with us. Have a great night and enjoy the games. Go Canada.
Oh my God! Oh! Shut it down! Let's go home!
Thanks for tuning in to Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily. Make sure to subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast feed at winnipegsportstalk.com.